Move more together for you, your team and a good cause. Join the Movivo Move Days, the ultimate health challenge during Lent, and win exclusive prizes. Collect points for 45 days in the Movivo app. Together with your colleagues or in your own personal way. Whether it's through your favorite sports, breathing exercises, giving up sugar or ice bathing, every point counts. Are you ready?
A warm welcome to the Wonder Pill Movement, the podcast for everyone who wants to take their health into their own hands. We are right in the middle of the Move Days, the health challenge for companies and a good cause, and we have prepared another special episode for you. We have an old acquaintance with us today, Dr. Stephan Domenig. Many of you also know him as Dr. D from the app. It's wonderful to have you here with us, dear Stephan.
Thank you, Michi. Thank you for inviting me back again. It's an honor, and I hope I can live up to the task, but we're certainly going to try.
Absolutely. Today we've taken on a really interesting topic, men's health. Yes, often it's quite a taboo subject, this topic of health in men who tend to say, oh, everything's fine anyway. But you have a lot of experience there. You coach many top managers, also middle-aged ones who perform fully in their jobs, but who also, of course, perform fully in sports and in their hobbies, who are challenged. And that's not always so easy. You say, yes, at 50, there's no sudden decline. But it is a very important turning point in men's health. Why?
Yes, you'll find that out for yourself. I'm already well over 50 years old. And so that's also a topic that simply affects me personally, of course. Up to 50, the body is quite constant. You can see that in most of your own photos, you don't change much. But it's not just about appearance. It's also about how you feel, right? So from 20 to 50, you can easily get up every morning and put in a considerable amount of work. It can also improve significantly. Of course, during that time, it often drew the short straw, having to rebuild, and it did. And eventually, you notice it gets progressively harder, even with a more or less consistent lifestyle. Perhaps it gets harder to maintain your weight, that the weights at the gym or whatever you're doing suddenly feel heavier despite the same number that's written on them, you know, and that your sleep somehow suffers a bit. So something is changing. It's changing gradually. Sometimes things happen overnight, like age-related farsightedness. It can begin quite abruptly, and that, of course, affects both men and women. However, for women, it's much more pronounced due to menopause and therefore has become a more significant topic, not just in the media, but generally, where simply much more changes in their daily lives. For us, it's more gradual, and as you mentioned, it's rarely discussed. You really have to come to my practice or simply into relevant circles to start talking and hear what troubles us men, since we are both men, a bit in old age or in our advancing years.
You've already mentioned several of these slow, insidious developments. Are there perhaps 2 or 3 more indicators that are commonly overlooked?
I don't think they're overlooked at all. They're quite distinctly noticed. For instance, just difficulties, namely erectile dysfunction.
Okay, we're in. Now
we're right in the thick of it. This is generally perceived quite distinctly by men. That's when it really gets serious. That's where the real stakes are, as you know, right? It's therefore doubly interesting because it doesn't just concern the captain, right? And we live for the captain, but more fundamentally, it actually expresses overall vascular health, which is directly and immediately linked to heart health, actually shows, right? Which simply manifests in other areas. But you have vessels here, so you have them throughout the body everywhere. And if these vessels somehow can function as they are meant to, then that is also a more or less global process, which of course on the one hand reduces or destroys pleasure, but on the other hand might also be life limiting up to an increased risk of heart attack, for example.
Well, we're already right in the middle of it now, Stephan, you're well known for your ability to explain complex medical or physiological processes very simply. What's the underlying reason why our blood vessels aren't functioning as well as they should?
Now the journey truly begins. Let me start over. What significantly changes around the age of 50 for both men and women is in the background the body's hormonal capacity. This hormonal capacity primarily involves the synthesis of steroid hormones. Steroids are the very substances that made Arnold Schwarzenegger, already with large muscles, even more massive. Ani, respect, my apologies. Yes, I'm serious, yes. Made them even bigger. And all steroid hormones are formed from cholesterol, right? Then the conversion begins in every body cell. We already discussed that a bit last time. Within every single body cell, specifically in the mitochondria, these are the small energy-producing units that each and every cell contains. From cholesterol, a prohormone is synthesized, which is essentially a hormone precursor, and it is named pregnenolone. It is incredibly difficult to pronounce and even much more challenging to spell out. This pregnenolone is produced enzymatically. This means that something is cleaved from the cholesterol within the fat cells, isn't it? Enzymes are biological motors, and these biological motors, just like the organism itself, grow more fatigued over time. That is the phenomenon behind it. And then we have less of this precursor, pregnenolone, which is then converted in the glands into sex hormones like DHEA, testosterone. Men all know testosterone. Yes. On the other hand, cortisone or cortisol is also formed from that same pregnenolone. No, it doesn't convert directly, but through a few intermediate steps. And if one is unfortunately chronically stressed, and many people are continuously throughout their entire lives, then among other things, this diminishing amount of precursor substance primarily gets converted into cortisol because the body attempts, with its very last reserves of strength, to cope with or manage that chronic stress rather than supporting the organism itself. And with that, the decline sets in because the arrow leading to the DHEA and thus the testosterone pathway, it somewhat dries up, it becomes weaker. This then leads to these kinds of phenomena, such as reduced muscle strength and as a result, an increased accumulation of body fat. If you happen to be unlucky, and that's truly a poor combination, because specifically abdominal fat is hormonally active and it actually steals away your testosterone. It effectively converts the testosterone into estrogen. Estrogen is actually good for men, but in excessive amounts, it's not good at all, is it? If you add it externally in the form of beer, as a phytoestrogen, you'll eventually end up with moobs, you know, those male breasts or man boobs, so to speak. So you'll start to develop breast tissue there. All these are, so to speak, phenomena you wouldn't normally see in a 20-year-old. You'd have to live a very dissolute life to already have that at 20.
Yes, I come across it, and there's more and more of it.
Unfortunately, that is indeed the case. That's something we can certainly delve into in more detail later, can't we? Now, we have the entire hormonal pathway. It's through that you can actually best illustrate all of these aging processes, because that's where the genuine fatigue truly lies. And this fatigue is, of course, twofold in nature. On the one hand, in this reduction of the conversion capability with the diminished performance of these mitochondrial enzymes, and on the other hand, with the mitochondria themselves, because mitochondria do not primarily produce hormones, but simply energy. It did the same, and if they get tired or simply limited in their numbers, then literally the life energy decreases, right? And at 20, you have life energy in abundance. My sons are that age, right? That is, we have plenty of it. And by 50, mid-50s, it's already less. And with my father, who's a grandfather, you can see that a lot of life energy has been well lived, let's put it nicely, which is good, right? You have to handle it well, and that's how these things happen. Shall we still discuss vascular health or move to the next question?
No, I'd like to try and quickly summarize it again. So this is actually a negative spiral, which also has a few additional side effects, okay, right? So on the one hand, chronic stress robs us of our testosterone.
At the end of the day, you could put it like that, yes. And of course, but less energy is produced in the mitochondria. So the start is already a bit more challenging,
clearly,
much more difficult, yes. Yeah.
So it really applies to the spiral, as you've already brought up. It's a downward pull that one experiences. And this pull, one can, of course, simply stand by and watch. Or rather, one can even actively encourage it by eating as much as possible, getting as little exercise as possible, and diligently pouring several beers into oneself every single day. Or you think, not a good idea, I'll pull back the momentum, right? You're only here, you won't make it to 20. That's not possible, but you can manage to remain surprisingly capable for a significant portion of your life. And the health span, as it were, the health span is, after all, the most desirable thing in life. Because as long as you're healthy, you can still actively engage with life, hopefully gain something from it. And if you have to also make changes,
So we can also establish this. There is a natural
Indeed.
aging process that we cannot stop. That we all know that, but we can certainly influence its speed with our lifestyle, with exercise, with nutrition, and with sleep.
Indeed, yes.
And that should be the message, right? That is the miracle pill, exercise.
This is the miracle pill of physical activity, isn't it? And since this is precisely your area of expertise, particularly regarding the body's cortisol levels, right? You can actually regulate that quite effectively with regular exercise. Not only through movement, but it's certainly a key factor. It's a good idea, I believe. You're already doing this as part of your challenges to simply undertake some moderate, but certainly daily endurance exercise. You always have to be careful there, because if you're already feeling overstressed, even a small amount can be too much. But most people tend to believe they are overstressed, when in reality they still have quite good reserves. So people often just talk themselves out of it. A certain level of discipline is usually not a bad thing.
Now, you see, if you follow the research or the discussions about it, or even on social media, two camps are emerging. On the one hand, there are those who say, okay, maximal oxygen uptake is very important for our healthy years of life. Mortality significantly increases when oxygen uptake decreases. Conversely, if it increases, yes, the risk is reduced. On the other hand, there's a second camp that says, yes, musculature is the most important thing. Where does the truth lie?
As
in
always,
the middle.
right in the middle. It was completely predictable. First of all, I'm never really right. That's quite clear from the very beginning. But we simply observe and just look, right? If you pay attention to your muscles, especially as a man, you give your body a stimulus to simply maintain testosterone production. So that is important. If you only do endurance training, just run, you neglect your upper body anyway, for example. And that's not really beneficial, because you need, as I said, your muscles to even have the impulse to produce testosterone. If you only do strength training, on the other hand, it's often the case that these strength training sessions are inherently stressful, and you also run the risk of, for example, even damaging mitochondria excessively, so that they cannot recover quickly enough. What I mean, strength training is good, even 2-3 times a week is good. Perhaps at my age, not quite so intense, maybe just do 3 sets, not completely exhaust yourself, checking if you can still do a 1-arm pull-up with 100 kilos of added weight. You don't have to.
Exactly. It always depends on the starting level, but it's generally not needed.
And on the other hand, really make sure that every day, perhaps 20, 30 or even 40 minutes, you get some moderate exercise. Even if it's just a walk or a brisk stroll, you need to air out your body, make sure that air gets to your brain, make sure that air gets into the combustion, into the cell combustion, because it needs that to function properly. And it's simply a regulatory mechanism, best to walk in the forest.
We are fortunate. We live in a lovely place. That's not something that everyone is given. Or if you go to the mountains, you can regenerate so much better.
Yes, we already know quite a lot, also from many other podcast episodes, about the significance of being in nature and the importance of physical activity outdoors as well.
Let's get back to the topic of vascular health. You also mentioned that this is directly connected to heart health, and that from this age, around 50, the risk of heart attack naturally also triples, or rather increases. Why is that?
This is a statistical value. It won't be the case for every single person. I think there are many factors involved. A factor that's often not examined, not even clinically, is again due to stress, oxidation. That means fats in the body can actually go rancid, you know. Fat can not only, if you leave it out, like oil outside over time, developing a rancid smell, if you forget butter outside or even in the fridge, but also oxidize inside the body. These oxidized fats have the major disadvantage that they become functionally irrelevant, haven't they? The body can no longer utilize them as building blocks. The body primarily incorporates cholesterol into its cell membranes, you know, and also into hormones. You see, that is the basic raw material. So if any single body cell, and as we just heard a moment ago, every single body cell produces pregnenolone from cholesterol, a vital hormone. Every body cell truly needs it, especially the brain requires it, and particularly the nerves depend on it, but also, of course, the glands.
If the fat that arrives is already rancid, the target organ or cell can no longer use it, and to put it simply, just sends it back, right? Back, where is back? There's no going back. This to the gut, theoretically, because that's where it was absorbed. But the gut also says, no, I don't need these rancid fats anymore. And then what happens on the highways happens, doesn't it? Allegedly, all these rest stops and tunnels and so on are getting more and more polluted because people just throw everything out the window there. That's what the body ultimately does too, and essentially picks up this rancid fat somewhere along the way and attaches it to the vessels. And that's essentially then the, fat sticks there. And atherosclerosis is a fatty degeneration and not a hardening. Yes, a hardening. It will gradually become that over time. So that then becomes, so to speak, the very starting point for this narrowing and hardening of the blood vessels. The vessels that harden can no longer react elastically to the heart's pressure. It's a counter pressure system. When the heart contracts, the vessels open. When the heart fills again, the vessels close, you see. I hope you can see this a bit with my hands. It does this all the time. And that's how the blood flow just keeps on going. If the heart now tries to pump, but the vessels can barely open anymore because they've become much stiffer, because something is stuck inside them, well, then the heart has to push much harder, doesn't it?
Blood pressure is elevated. It's in the name.
The blood pressure then increases, so to speak, doesn't it? And with that, of course, the risk increases that at some point, somewhere, a small vessel bursts, for example, in the heart. And a heart attack is always when something breaks or something. So it simply leads to a blockage. And then behind it is a section of muscle that no longer receives energy, that no longer receives oxygen. It then dies. And yes, the risk, it just keeps getting higher over time.
But of course, it's also, once again, dependent on lifestyle.
Smoking won't help you there. Not that I smoke, thank goodness. But smoking just really does nothing because it's oxidative stress per se.
Yes.
That means even if you've smoked until 50, it's still a good time to quit. These risks also dramatically drop again, don't they? And exercise and everything that promotes elasticity in turn, breathing exercises, etc., are always beneficial because every structure is grateful when it can regenerate, when it can move, and the body does an astonishing amount as long as it gets the opportunity.
Yes, you mentioned earlier that fat oxidizes. I'd just like to properly put that into perspective again. That might be something that's not entirely clear or tangible for many people. On the one hand, fat oxidation is also spoken of quite positively when fats are utilized as an energy source within the liver. Could you briefly elaborate on these two distinct differences for us?
Yes and no. Well, it's a yes and no if I can do that. The beta oxidation of fatty acids in the liver, that actually serves for energy production. Yes.
It is also commonly referred to as fat burning, fat oxidation.
Correct.
For that, in turn, you need, which is why it's good to go for a walk after eating, you need oxygen for that. The oxidation of fats on the go, so to speak, in the bloodstream only affects a very small percentage and does not serve energy production. Instead, it's a purely damaging process that then creates a substrate, in this case, cholesterol or oxidized LDL. There's this LDL and HDL that's always measured, and you can also measure the oxidized LDL. That costs, I believe, 20 euros, so very little. Health insurance in Austria doesn't cover it, but it's actually a very important risk parameter. It really only describes the proportion of fat that becomes harmful. Isn't that right? That partly isn't just connected to your lifestyle, but you can actually have bad luck and experience difficulties with liver detoxification. Isn't that right? That is genetic. That is something you are born with. You simply have, if you will, smaller pipe diameter through which you have to get the toxins out. These are enzymatic processes. It's just figuratively, I think, better to describe it as a pipe. And then one reacts to pollutants that come from outside, which then essentially compete with the detoxification of all internal processes, leading to increased oxidative stress. This then results in a greater occurrence of these processes. If you additionally smoke and so on, you often see it quite simply in a kind of premature aging. People often have early wrinkled skin, look a bit gray, their tissue tone gets worse, and they just look worn out sooner. You can like that a weathered face, but even that is fundamentally not a good sign.
It'll probably come soon enough or even later. Yes. you're saying, yes, to a certain extent, this issue can certainly be managed and something can be done about it, yes. All these topics we've just covered, health is management.
In the end, it's management. Manageable.
Manageable, yes. How do we translate that into English? How do you go about it?
Let's take a very specific case study. For instance, someone comes to you who is 54, holds significant professional responsibility, has leadership duties, and also has a great deal to accomplish by his very nature. He's a top performer who used to play sports, perhaps even competitive sports. Now he also wants to finish his Ironman, so he wants to keep performing well there, but he notices that somehow his energy, his juice is running out, the air is starting to run out. How?
Firstly, you can't actually paint everyone with the same brush because unfortunately there are situations where people have hormonally messed themselves up in earlier phases, you know, due to overtraining or perhaps relative undernourishment or at least a vital nutrient deficiency, you know, where they've truly reached a point where the body's own system can no longer recover by itself. Yes. At that point, you essentially can't continue without hormone replacement therapy. And besides all the necessary nutrients, you also need hormonal supplementation. That can be done. However, you'll need very frequent lab tests initially, and you should find a colleague who is familiar with it. That's unfortunately quite rare, especially among men. We are rather neglected in that area. That's why I try to do it in my practice.
Then you're the expert.
Because this is always something that many colleagues simply don't sufficiently recognize or find themselves confronted with this particular issue. Well, there are actually several contributing factors. One crucial aspect is rhythm, indeed, isn't it? Chronic sustained stress. We've previously discussed chronic stress, of course, and we also stated that chronic stress invariably leads to consistently elevated cortisol levels, didn't we? Prolonged stress is, quite frankly, poison for the human body.
You can allow yourself to be stressed for a few days now during these MOVO days, the first few days, but eventually you'll need a weekend again, or maybe 3 days off, or perhaps a whole week where you can lean back and then say, MOVO, let me be supported. Yes, now I have 3 days off. Yes, it's important. Breaks are important. That means simply breaking up your daily routine is a vital first step. Like deciding to breathe out 3 times before eating and then eating, or truly saying, now I'm taking a break. I'm going outside now. The weather's nice. I'll go for a half-hour walk. Of course, you can't prescribe anything there, but every person can only look at how they are living right now and where the gaps are. What do I do with those gaps? And then see if I can somehow make things better. This doesn't always have to be viewed through the lens of this wretched efficiency, but better also in the sense of making it more joyful. Ultimately, at the end of the day, it's just more enjoyable if you're not completely exhausted when you finish up in the evening. Yes. These can be small modifications. I'll say something provocative now. Maybe you don't drink your after-work beer at 8 in the evening, but at 5 in the afternoon. Yes, that can be smart, because if you drink at 5, by the time you go to sleep at 10, it's broken down. Yes. That's much smarter. Yeah, it'll relax you briefly at 5. Then you're still good for a while. That one small beer won't knock you out. For heaven's sake, you don't have to drink beer. And then maybe you'll be a bit more relaxed, perhaps come home friendlier. It could be a way to cope. So you can certainly also intervene paradoxically. And for example, and again, I'm a non-smoker, but you can limit 30 cigarettes a day and position them strategically. That might be smarter to have 3 proper breaks than no breaks and trying to quit smoking while working even more, right? Well, the best is always the best, but the second best is often still not better at all. No. So rhythm is simply a very important thing. What's always absolutely central then is that one manages to get the inflammation of the intestines, meaning gut health, big under control. Because even the chronically stressed person usually has bad eating habits and often an upset stomach. He notices this himself, which is why many people come and say, doctor, I'm always so bloated, or this or that, or I can't go to the bathroom regularly. So there are infinitely many manifestations. In doubt, now is the time. No, not because of the Movevo Move days, but because of Lent. It started today. So one could fast for a few days and try to cleanse the gut. Different topic, we can discuss that more extensively another time, but it's very, very important. It does an incredible amount hormonally, right? Fasting cure is rejuvenating. It directly improves all these cleanup processes, these intracellular scavenger processes. This ultimately enhances all the cell organelles, including the mitochondria in their performance, but also extracellularly in the major organ systems, in the interstitial spaces where much good is achieved. And you really need to grasp this. Supplementation is crucial. While you might manage without it sometimes at a certain age, due to the general decline in, for example, the gut's absorption capacity, it's no longer possible to achieve truly high concentrations of vital nutrients in the body without supplements. This, of course, becomes even more valuable when your overall lifestyle is healthy. Otherwise, I'm just expensively pouring it in at the top, and then I lose it again at the bottom, and that's good for the one who makes it, but only second best for the one who takes it, right?
First of all, there were 3 points written with pauses. Also pauses even in daily life, but also perhaps a longer break, like a short vacation or a week, yes, so that you truly see life as a cycle.
That's how it is, perhaps just as a catchphrase. 1 hour per day, 1 day per week, 1 week per month. That would be absolutely ideal.
Great rule of thumb.
Who actually gets a whole week off every month, but it would be absolutely wonderful, wouldn't it? Then it would slowly, yes, exactly, yes.
And then naturally, we need to create the right conditions for that primarily relates to the gut, specifically the health of our gut, so that the nutrients can also be properly utilized and absorbed by the body. That's a very important point, indeed a crucial one. And then, of course, you can already go into the details. You've already brought up the keyword supplementation. You are also, in a way, breaking new ground.
Yes,
you'd like to offer even more
that's how it is. We're specifically working with 2 colleagues, a pharmacist and a sports scientist. I'm the doctor in the group. So we now have a product that's very close to being ready for market, which is specifically targeted at men, from 50 years old and above. Hooray, guys, we're right there in the thick of it, aren't we? With the approach of packing everything in there, that men actually need. It's not bad for women either, but we still designed it for us girls.
Not for us girls, no. I mean, not for us women, but rather women for us men, My apologies. I meant female.
It's good.
Where we then really try to address a comprehensive range of different aspects. So exactly this autophagy, promoting the cleaning process within the cells, ensuring that we advance mitochondrial health, trying to introduce adaptogens so that the body can better cope with stress, and being as hormonally supportive as possible, because that is truly the absolute linchpin. Naturally, we also need to ensure that the inflammation in the body decreases, and simply to formulate the entire product so that a single daily intake is enough. It's so how can I explain it? There's just so much that we need to incorporate into it with all that we've achieved that it simply won't fit into capsules anymore. That's why we're offering the whole thing in powder form. You can then prepare it as a drink, right? Because you know it yourself. If you swallow more than 2 or 3 capsules, you've had enough. They're already in there and you don't want any more. So a powder as taste neutral as possible, so you can actually get it down. And our approach was always to really offer an all-in-one product with the focus on men over 50, because, as I said, a lot has changed by then. You can still call it that. You'll only get stronger. And so to ensure that our health span, we call this the health span system, of course, that we can extend our healthy lifespan for as long as possible and as well as possible.
Yes, there was quite a lot covered in that again. You said that health is something that can be managed. Management systems only work effectively when they are simple. Then they are implementable. Then they are practical for everyday life. How can one get started? Should a checkup be done at the beginning? What are the first steps?
A checkup is certainly useful, and during the checkup, one should really have their hormone levels examined. These should be measured starting with cholesterol and including pregnenolone. Pregnenolone is a factor that's stable throughout the day. It doesn't matter when it's taken. However, for testosterone, it's good to do it first thing in the morning, ideally before 8 a.m.
So that means a regular medical examination isn't enough now?
No, that's not sufficient because, for instance, that's not addressed at all. And it's also actually it's partly misinterpreted, you know. And for example, sleep disturbances or a general feeling of unease are then treated more often with antidepressants or sleeping pills instead of investigating whether in the background, which is far more probable, there isn't simply a case of hormonal fatigue, you know. This is common. And hormonal fatigue can either be boosted or treated, whether through medicinal mushrooms or whatever, or simply supplemented if in doubt. In my opinion, there's nothing wrong with that. Because if my thyroid isn't working, I also go to the doctor and he gives me thyroid hormones. You see, yes, and if as I get older, some hormones just diminish, you can simply take them. This is essentially a relatively low side effect, good option to support the body over a long period if it's well managed, regularly monitored, and if the preparations are bioidentical, etc. After that, so after the checkup or even before it, you can definitely rethink your own life's rhythm. That's always possible. You can introduce new routines because I believe that only through routine is it truly possible to consistently follow through with something. One can resolve to do 5 minutes of gymnastics every day after brushing their teeth. 10 is better, but it's never much better than 5, is it? And then, of course, always take their little health span system shot every day so that you establish a baseline. I mean this seriously. So to do something like that, to have the baseline in place. Of course, it's entirely up to each individual how they choose to resolve this particular issue. However, over time, you'll inevitably realize that you'll either end up with a massive number of tigers in front of you that you constantly have to sort through, or you'll simply opt for something more compact anyway. What's compact, I believe, and I'm speaking now as a man for men, is that we generally prefer straightforward and uncomplicated matters. That might just be better. And then you can try, as I said, to rhythmically structure your day, and in the evening try to relax well, and at least during the week make sure you still get enough sleep. You can catch up on sleep on the weekend, but you can only catch up if you're able to sleep. So this might seem trivial, but on the other hand, it's quite relevant, isn't it? Because if you're in pain, if something's hurting you, you won't sleep as well. If you perhaps constantly have to get up at night to use the restroom because your prostate is already enlarged and so on, you simply won't be able to sleep properly again, will you? So you somehow also have to learn to manage your sleep, to emphasize that once more and figure out how to best get through it. And the smarter you approach it, the more you'll realize that perhaps some processes you felt resigned to or believed were irreversible can actually become reversible to a certain extent, that you can improve. In every phase of life, as long as you have vitality, you can always become healthier again. It's possible, right? You have to work at it. You have to work at it with a certain thoughtfulness and persistence. It is always advisable to be confident, but on the other hand, not to let the reins slacken. And I think that's how you move forward, don't you?
I believe that was a pretty good summary of the conversation, again, of our talk. Once again, a very holistic discussion with you. It's always fascinating how you present such complex connections to us in such a simple way.
Well, thank you very much in advance. I believe you have brought something along for all our listeners and for all the Move Days participants.
Exactly. The first 3 interested people, right, who remembers that the health span system stands for Rediscover Your True Vitality. And then I believe they can sign up there through your homepage.
We'll be doing this directly through the mobile application.
Regarding the
itself.
application, please
Rediscover.
accept my apologies. Rediscover Your True Vitality. Each of them will then be sent a complete package of our health span system all in one.
Yes, rediscover your true vitality. Now, I've said it for the very last time.
You can write this down. You will then get it for your husbands.
Yes, often it's also precisely the women who give the men that little push. And
that's how it typically goes.
Speaking from experience, yes, there were many exciting things included. Again, today, men's health was particularly in focus. What I've taken away for myself, yes, is that rhythm is absolutely crucial, that it's okay to take breaks, that breaks are necessary. Yes, without them, it won't work in the long run, that you have to stick to the basics. First, you need to establish them, especially concerning gut health. As the center of our immune system, to then be able to absorb and process nutrients. And then, of course, supplementation, in your opinion, makes absolute sense to get yourself thoroughly checked out. Yes, not just the general health examinations, but you need precisely these specific values all around your hormones. And yes, this topic with pregnenolone and all its effects, I believe all men will now make a very important note of that.
Absolutely. And just be honest, right? If you simply notice that something is changing, don't bury your head in the sand, but just go to your colleagues, your trusted colleagues, and address it, right? Let them take a closer look if you realize you're stuck. Every one of us focuses on different things within their practice. Just keep looking. There's certainly someone in every area who's simply more interested in this, and then just keep going until you've found someone who can guide you well. And I believe then you'll surely get through this time well too.
Well, for anyone who would like to visit Stephan at his practice, you know, your practice is located in Klagenfurt. Many people travel quite a distance to see you, even from all over Austria and beyond. So the journey is definitely worth it. Dear Stephan, thank you so much for joining us again as an expert at the Move Days and for sharing your valuable expertise with all of us.
And yes, and a few days are still on the program. It's still about moving more together, perhaps using the time to establish 1 or 2 routines and then maintaining them beyond the Move Days.
Let's make a greater impact working together. Use it or lose it.
Or lose.
More together for you, your team, and a good cause. Join the Movivo Move Days, the ultimate health challenge during Lent, and win exclusive prizes. Collect points for 45 days in the Movivo app, together with your colleagues or in your own personal way. Whether it's through your favorite sports, breathing exercises, giving up sugar, or ice bathing, every point counts. Are you ready?